And welcome back to Miniature Dragon Comic Review, coming to you live from Seattle, Washington, or maybe somewhere in the galaxy. Heck, we don't know. As always, I'm Daniel Doc Gentry, your host, and with me is Woody and Alex. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey.
Hi.
Just one question. Does everybody have your towel?
I have mine in the bathroom.
So unprepared
I do have
for today.
this, though.
Nice, Alex. That's not a towel. It's not going to help you.
No, it's not. I've got a Christmas stocking nearby. Will that do?
So, obviously, we're going to be talking about a very old comic book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I believe it came out in 92, 93.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to get a hard copy because we couldn't find it digitally. Thank you, Woody.
Yeah, well, it doesn't exist digitally, as far as I can tit's an interesting that Marvel and DC almost exclusively focus on superheroes, but every once in a while they pick up an oddball license. Like recently, Marvel had the Dark Tower, and DC has had like Nine Princes of Amber and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and but I might not have been very successful. Like I know when they did Nine Princes of Amber, they only adapted the first two books, and that was it, and then it ended. And this one, I don't know how far it went. I know they did more than the first graphic novel, but certainly would like to see if they did more. But it was really hard to track down, like super rare. It was almost as rare as trying to pick up an original copy of Aliens versus Predator, or an original copy of Batman versus Predator.
So what I'm hearing is possession is 9/10 of the law. No, I'm just kidding. I'll get it back to
Yes.
you.
Yeah. No, yeah, very, very hard book to find. I'm sure you guys had a similar experience, but when I was in junior high, it's like everybody was either reading Lord of the Rings, Hitchhiker's Guide, or the Elfstones, or there was like these books everybody was reading, right? And this was definitely one of them. I didn't read Elfstones. I read the others. I picked up Dune, but I remember checking it out from the school library, on the recommendation of like everybody, and damn, those books were good.
I own all of them. They're behind me on that bookshelf.
Nice. So basically, this graphic novel, or the first trade in the series, basically adapts the first book, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it struck me as interesting. I mean, I don't think we need to do a synopsis because if you're watching this, you probably already read the book, but it's interesting to me reading through it because we've had two other adaptations so far that I'm aware of. We have the one from the BBC, and then we have the Hollywood movie. And the BBC one suffered for basically a lack of special effects and budget, and the Hollywood one suffered for being a Hollywood production and being made by people that did not give a damn about the source material. This one, for me, I think is possibly one of the most faithful adaptations. I mean, it's interesting what they didn't put in the book just because of space limitations. But compared to the other two versions, it felt way more faithful in terms of like the environment as well as the story. It's pretty much all there. And it feels like a lived-in universe. Whereas, the BBC production, Alex will back me up on this, the walls seemed quite blank and Spartan, and they didn't have the art budget to really, really develop the world. And,
a can of paint, can go for a couple of pounds. So, that's pretty expensive.
Yeah. Oh, my God. It was amazing. They even went further than Hollywood. Like, when Arthur was laying in the mud, and he's got mud on his robe throughout the entire book. It's it's freaking awesome. The places look gross, and it's just you could go way further than they even tried in Hollywood, and they had the budget for it. What do you guys say?
I think you're being unjust to the movie.
What?
I think
the movie was fun.
I think you're being unfair to the movie, but we'll have that as another time. We're here to talk about the comic book, and I will have this argument about the movie and adaptations later. Alex knows where I sit on these because we've had very long, in-depth conversations about them. It is absolutely unfair to take anything from a source material that's written or from a production value of like radio and argue with them when they convert that into a movie source, because there are things that they have to take into account when they do it. Having said that, This comic book was very interesting. I thought it was funny that you had to hunt it down. Did you find out anything about this comic book, like how it came into existence, what it was?
Well, I mean, I didn't get to do a lot of research on that. I suspect details would be hard to find, other than maybe tracking down the editors who worked on the book. But it's usually what happens with these things is somebody goes, "Oh, I wonder if the license is available. Let's go get it." It is. Now we're making the book, and it's just that, like, what happens is the licenses also expire, right? And so books like this will probably never be available digitally, because when it's kind of like Batman versus Predator, where the rights are held by two different companies. So it's not going to be possible to put it up on Comixology, because the money splits too much. Nobody's going to make anything, and that's probably what's going on here. It's like it reverted back to the rights holder, and they haven't decided they want to do anything with it. Whoever owns the comic book images now, like DC only would have had it for a limited amount of time, long enough to recoup their investment. And once that's done, it goes back to whoever actually owns it, and then they have to want to do something with it at that point.
So, Alex, what did you think?
So, let's go with the top three. So, as top three of like the parts that we go into as videos.
The Matrix for understanding.
Hmm?
It's the
Matrix.
Matrix for understanding. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, typography. There was definitely some parts that I thought were kind of lacking or had some problems. So the within the text, there's some areas where it's white text in these blue boxes.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt maybe just because of the way that the print has aged, or maybe just the way that their printers were, I found it kind of hard to read some of those.
It was hard to read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought there was some parts where it's like, the other characters talking, was able to get like who was actually saying what. There wasn't any kind of problems there. But when it came to these like little almost BBC documentary parts within it, where they use the blue and white text, I felt that fell apart because there wasn't good contrast.
Those were the entries from the Hitchhiker's Guide, basically. It was neat art design, but it needed more contrast. And
as overall art, I thought this was a pretty solid vision and adaptation. I thought, they definitely went in part of their own direction. There was definitely a lot of inspirations that I could say that were very similar to the BBC's version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in how certain characters looked and things like that were very similar, because I think when this was created, that was the only source material besides the novels and the radio dramatization.
I think some characters may have been a little more faithfully adapted, because like Zaphod and Trillian, I hated how they looked on the BBC version, because Trillian was presented as just a complete bubblehead ditz, and Zaphod had this, they tried, but they had this weird animatronic head that kind of bumped around, and he had the extra arm that moved at the same time as,
Well, I still felt that was a lot better than the Pez dispenser version that was in the Hollywood movie.
I agree completely. Oh my God. Having a lemon thing on his head for his oh my God. Of course, that would have improved him.
So as the third part, like story-wise, it's kind of hard to say anything of good, bad, or indifferent, but this was a bit of an abridged version. Mm-hmm. So there was certain aspects, like what he said, that probably just had to be cut because of time management of how many pages were printed and within that nature. But it did kind of screw part of the flow. It did kind of make it feel like, okay, where's this point, or what's this thing that you're talking about? only because I know the source material. I get what you're going for, but I think if I was a new reader, I'd be kind of like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
What's the reference
for a new reader
with your towel?
Yeah,
like I felt like that was definitely a point where they could have spent a little extra part within the pages, and get that a little clearer, how they did within the movie. And
well, yeah, because specifically there's that part in the beginning where they're saying, okay, well, this is what you can do with the towel. Like you can, put it over your head, and if you can't see the monster, it thinks you can't see it, and therefore you become invisible to the monster, right? And that just a stupid logic point. And in the comic, all they show is the guy walking past the monster with a towel over his head with no context or explanation. And there's that part of the BBC where they were talking about how, like, I don't remember if this was in the book. Remember from the BBC show where the towel travels a certain distance, and then you know how far you went through hyperspace. And it's just like little details like that, and like we're completely missing from it. And it was interesting, the things that they focused on versus what was actually left in the book. And like there are some things that I think, yeah, like this might not be the best introduction for a new reader.
I take full responsibility for this comic book being read on this particular episode as we talk about life, the universe, and everything.
Yeah. Well, I believe it's Alex's fault. He's the one that wanted to review it.
I believe.
No, actually, Doc was the one that first suggested of.
Really?
Around episode 40-ish or 39.
Yeah.
He made a statement of, what would be great for our 42nd episode?
I asked if there was a comic book for Hitchhiker's Guide because I was like, we're coming up on 42 and it just seems appropriate.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, and it did
but
exist. Everything else.
I'll take full responsibility of. I was the one that made mention of, hey, we could either do one of two things: either not review for the next couple of weeks, or we could change things and say, here's our
Christmas special.
Christmas special, like Ewoks and Wookiees galore, and just go on that kind of direction. And then because we didn't get it shipped in time, we made a New Year's special.
Hey, you know what? I got it as quick as I could find it.
Nobody's blaming you.
Yeah.
Alex is talking about all the talk because I was like, I really don't want to do 42 until this thing comes in. All right, but back to this comic book.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about the lettering a little bit because we talked about hand lettering versus like digital, and I'm definitely a fan of digital, partially because I don't have the handwriting for it. It's a lot of time and a lot of effort. And you can't go back and fix things so easily when you do it by hand. This though it was interesting reading this because like the really good letterers are consistent. They are able to keep the letters the same size, and I thought it was rather interesting that whoever they got to letter this kind of looked like he was in a rush. Like in some regards, they might have been on a schedule to get this thing out because like we got to get the door, we got to make that money. But it's it's kind of like it's probably going to sell regardless. So maybe you don't have to try as hard. But the lettering was wildly inconsistent. There were times where even in a sentence, the letters would shrink. Like he wasn't doing measurements to make sure they were the right size. I mean, everything was pretty legible, but it was weirdly inconsistent with the lettering. Did anybody else notice that?
I noticed that there was inconsistencies, but I didn't know if it was because it happened in certain parts when certain people were talking and doing certain things. I didn't know if it was a representation of that.
It didn't feel to me like it was an aspect of the story, because like sometimes you'll see guys, they'll just like a word will be bigger, but the rest of it would be the same size. It was just like the lack of consistency for me was a little weird. Just looking at that.
So the lettering in this, I was fine with all the lettering, and I don't know if it's because it's faded or because of what colors or. So let's just get this clear. If we compare this to a comic, like we went and bought any one of the ones that I have, I was just going to compare, like a Rat Queen's graphic novel to this graphic novel paperback. The quality of this one is nostalgic. It's real paper, like newspaper quality paper. It has print on it, and you can see where they set the red, then set the blue, then set the yellow. Mm-hmm. Like it has that kind of coloring to it. It would be a great collector's item for anybody who looks for stuff like that because it was kind of cool, but it was limited in the colors that it had, and the pinks had faded a little bit. So when the Hitchhiker's Guide wasn't using the blue and white lettering, when it was trying to use the pink over lettering, I couldn't read it. I didn't know what was going on at that point. Well,
it's one of those books. If you don't take care of it, it'll be gone in 50 years.
Yeah.
Like it deteriorate.
And one of those, the lettering itself, like I didn't notice anything except for it didn't look totally uniform, which to me meant somebody put some time into it. It wasn't just type on a computer until you get the right font and then put it into the bubble.
Yeah.
The art in this one is actually 50-50. There's a lot of cool aspects, like this one that's showing right now on my screen is the one where the pieces of the earth are, it's being slotted together like a puzzle box kind of thing.
Yeah.
I thought that there were some really neat artistic things in this, but then some it looked like, as you said, it just looked like it was rushed. Like they had to get that panel done. It didn't mean anything, so let's get it done and get to the next one. It is consistent with the people all the way through the book, but it like I said, there's little things in it like details or like just left things out. The storyline in it, it's hard to judge because the storyline is the same storyline through all of them, and I'm talking about major plot points. I'm not talking about the minuscule little things. It's if you read this comic, you could probably read this comic with the Hollywood video going on, and they are almost exactly on the same pattern of story.
Except for the part with the cathedral where they think that God sneezed.
Well, and they add things. So the funny thing to me is, I hear this argument a lot, and I can see it in this book where it could have been as well, is, oh my God, they added this, they did this, this is stupid. Well, first off, if there is anything in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that absolutely just made sense to you, you don't understand the book. And if you don't understand the book, I'm pretty sure that you can't get on your high horse and claim that you're a fan. Adding things like the Think helmet with the lemon squeeze thing, like, okay, I get it, it's stupid, but it's on topic with everything else, and it was the same with this comic. It was like there was dumb things, but it was on track with it. I'm not sure which robot I prefer, to be honest with you, the Hollywood movie or this comic book, because they're both have their flaws, I would say, about them. But this one...
Tough to compete with Alan Rickman.
This one is... Well, the one in the comic book, I think, is more true to the one in the books, because the one in the movie didn't complain as much as the one in the books did. It was like one of my things that it didn't translate it well over to it. All in all, it's not a bad comic book. You're talking about a comic book that is 26, 27 years old. It's not so bad. They definitely had a different thought process of what everybody looked like, what everybody would be like. They even had a different thought process of what the Vogons would look like in this. So,
well, one thing I want to talk about, like, we had different versions of Zaphod, and this is clearly, this version of the character is the most faithful to the book. I think it's kind of hard to get Arthur wrong, and Trillian, clearly they did a better job with her than in the movie, or sorry, the BBC. The movie I think was pretty good for her, but Ford, Prefect, I thought he looked really weird. He did not look like a human. What
he almost
of the choice there for him.
To me, it's like he could have been almost a Elven-like character.
At first I was the same way, but then I remember this was 93. It's 3 years after the 80s. This is not totally out of its realm. The dude's wearing parachute pants, big MC Hammer top, and his hair is just wild and crazy.
MC Hammer.
And that's dead on for that time period. I'm sorry. I have to disagree with you guys. I think that it fit at that time of just wild and crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's more like not so much the way he's dressed, because people will forgive that, but like his face, it was really weird, very kind of hard to look at. He seemed very strange to me to look at in the book. It seemed like an odd choice, but it's kind of like the version in the BBC show looked human. They just picked a weird looking human, and I guess they decided to make him a black guy in the movie, just for diversity. kind of felt like that.
Well, I will say he did play a really, really good Ford. Honestly.
Oh yeah, no, the guy did wonderful. It just felt to me like kind of like stunt casting, kind of like changing Johnny Storm to Black too for the same reason.
And even if it was pulling an Aquaman, he still really paid attention to what he was playing, and it came out. And I say that because the original Aquaman's not Samoan. But I think Mr. Momoa nailed it and nailed it out of the park. The attitude and what he would do, the Aquaman would be like.
Well, does anybody remember in the book if they said what Ford's skin color was? Does it even matter?
No,
it probably doesn't. But
they just said he looked. It didn't look like he was from England, is what it kind of described him as.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, he could have been from Middle Earth. Fair enough. But
what I'm saying is just because Aquaman, and I said when I saw the movie of Aquaman, everything is exactly right except for Aquaman and his dad. I'm sorry, I get it, I understand what people are trying to do, but at least Jason Momoa sat down and said, okay, what is Aquaman about? Because I really felt like he understood Aquaman himself in how he portrayed him, and just like I think that Ford was the same in the movies, and I don't think it's any different in the comic book. It really felt like that don't panic, loose, friendly stoner kind of person.
Mm-hmm. Well, it did. One of the things that came out for me, and like in the book, it felt like Ford and Arthur were best friends, and they kind of were just getting along, But in the book, in the comic book, the way it was presented to me, it kind of seemed like Arthur might have been getting on Ford's nerves potentially, because it's just so he felt more out of place in this environment than what I remembered him being in the book.
I mean, we're getting into semantics portion, I'm going to say, because that's a detail that doesn't matter. The person writing this comic was going, all right, I'm a human, I was just taken off Earth, I was told it exploded, and I was also told that before, when I didn't think there was life in the universe, now here it is, and it's almost exactly a macro progression of what Earth was. Okay, how would you be in that? And I think it's just a detail in that. As for comic book, I think this is a really fun read. I really do, and I'm a big fan of the books. But I'm also a fan of the movie, so you might not want to trust my judgment here. But I thought it was really fun. It was very... I thought it was cool to see what people thought the book would be, or what their adaptation of it would be. And I just think that they may have taken some things from the BBC, but they really didn't take the BBC. They created their own universe in this, and they had their own details and their own feel of everything. And that was my personal thing. I really did enjoy this comic book.
I actually had another question that was on my mind while I was reading it. I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but they have the part at the beginning where the Earth is destroyed, and you end up finding out eventually that the Earth was actually destroyed to prevent the secret to happiness to get out. That it was actually this psychiatrist in space that had destroyed the planet, and they actually showed the girl that had the realization of what of what it would of how to create universal happiness. And what was interesting to me is that later on, when Arthur comes back to Earth in one of the later books, when she gets recreated, you find out that she's locked away by the psychiatrist on Earth to keep that secret hidden as well. And Arthur ends up basically hooking up with her and traveling around the galaxy. And I was kind of wondering if we saw a flash of her. I wonder if when they come back to the fourth book later, if they got, I don't know if they got that far, but if they did, I kind of wondered if that was going to be the same character in the perspective of the people making the comic book.
Again, I was just reading the comic book to review it. I didn't even compare it to the book because, and the reason I like the movie is because whenever they do something that's similar or from a book or from a movie or from comics, I do two kinds of judging, which is I judge it from a fan perspective, but then I also have a second judgment, which is an independent artistic rendition thing. So I did the same thing with this comic book, where I just read it as a comic book, not as a fan of Douglas Adams and owning the books and reading them all the time, but just this looking at the comic for it being a fun little comic, I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I don't think the colors held up. I think they were great when it first came out. The parts that I had a hard time reading, I think it was more fade than color, and color options. Again, I don't know how many screens they had in 79, but this is definitely a paper screen printing, because you could tell how they laid it down.
Hey, Alex, you've been kind of quiet. Do you have anything else to add?
I guess, let's see. Are we at the point where we should wrap up? Or
yeah, let's start wrapping up. We got 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. So for me, it's kind of a mixed baggage, because it's like, in one hand, I wouldn't say this is my favorite adaptation of his property, but at the same time, it isn't one of the worst. I think it's like some of the visuals definitely were quite strong. Color choice, I do agree, of like, it's either because the way that it faded or just the color palette in some parts just don't feel like it works. And if they had a little bit more time, with panel arrangements, giving it an extra couple of pages to really express what was happening within the story, I think that could have helped, for just that ease of read, and also for like the people that know the source material, and to give like somebody that's a fresh eyes and a fresh view, a real experience of like why individuals that are fans of this really do love this, property, and why in cultural media it's so referenced. Like, The Answer to Life, 42. Thanks for All the Fish, and
oh no,
Garble Blaster.
No, it's Oh No, Not Again is the next.
Gargle Blaster.
Yeah.
But and you hear people all the time say, "Oh no, not again."
Yes. And I mean, it's like next to like Monty Python's Quest for the Holy Grail in a role-playing game, you'll get quotes from that property, and you'll get quotes from this property. And it's kind of that level of, this wasn't bad, but at the same time, it was definitely its own thing. And it was definitely a product of its time that it was created. It'd be great to see if some other studio or even DC repicks this up and could actually do another adaptation. But I definitely think that if they do, they need to look at the script and rewrite it with a little bit more pages in mind. And once again, I just feel like that would just help give that true experience of the book, of the movies, of the radio drama, and everything else, an extra part of like a great series. But as this, I think if you're not exactly a fan of Hitchhiker's Guide, you could still enjoy it, but there's always the movie.
Woody?
Well, I think that if you want to be introduced to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you should read the book first. If you read the book, I think this comic would be a lot of fun. Kind of just going through and like seeing some fun visuals. It's a fun comic. I wouldn't use this as your main introduction because of so many things that were fun from the book that didn't make it in. But it was a lot of fun to read. I thoroughly enjoyed it. If I had the other books, I would definitely be reading them. I'd say 4 out of 5 stars. A lot of fun, in spite of its flaws. If you can find a copy, pick it up. Definitely pick it up.
And I actually agree with Woody on this. If you could find a copy of this, by all means, pick it up, enjoy it. I would even go so far as to say you don't need to read the books and stuff like that. I think that on its own, this is good. It's going to be a little hard to follow without the understanding of what the books gave, but I think it's good on its own. I did have fun with it, and I did see, but if you do get your hands on a copy of this, please take care of it. This thing is, like I said, the one that we've got, it was, you could tell it's been, the guy liked it, but he didn't maintain it. And it is what it is.
Let's just say I didn't buy the most expensive one I could find.
That's true. Well, it's probably super expensive because it was so hard to find. But
Yeah.
that's all the time we got, guys. If you're buying anything else, I just want to say, read more comics, keep it nerdy, and live your dreams.
All right.
MiniatureDragon.squarespace.com.